recorded. So I have these various levels of experience, right? We all do. The vital energy arises, we add a story to it. Anxiety, being very ambiguous, more so than the other emotions as to the cause, has this greater capacity to fuck with our heads because we're so confused about where it arises from. And so our brain can make up some really crazy stories about it, right? So we then go and try to become aware, and we can either react, we can resist, which is fight it. We can react to it, which is worry and run around and make to-do lists and replay scenarios in our brain and do all this stuff. Or we can allow it. And when we allow it, we just observe the vital energy moving through us, describe what it feels like for us, and then we can notice the thoughts that are arising, right? The vital energy combined with a story is an emotion. We can recognize the thoughts, not identify them as true, but as just thoughts. And then that helps us be more of an observer of the experience rather than strongly identifying with the experience. Yeah. So also watch your phrasing, because a lot of the time we'll say, I'm anxious. And it's like, well, there we go. We've just identified. We've said, I am anxious. But what if we could just say, anxiety? Or any emotion for that matter. Oh, there's anger. Oh, there's fear. Oh, there's anxiety, right? So it's one thing to just say, oh, it's so easy to say, be and allow the emotion, but how do we do that? So, we have mindfulness, right? So mindfulness helps us be aware that we're anxious to begin with. And then we have self-compassion, because I find that, especially in this day and age, it's so hard, not just for me, but a lot of my Freedom School students and a lot of humans, to be with a difficult emotion, because like life is so overwhelming, it feels like. And when I offer myself self-compassion, then I'm more able to resource from within myself to be with the difficult emotion. So I will, put my hand on my heart, I'll feel the warmth, and I'll say, yeah, this is hard, right? No wonder I'm scared right now. Yeah, like I had that really difficult event before that made this experience really hard, right? And now I'm being triggered, noticing I'm being triggered. I say, it's okay, Anna, this is hard. What do you need right now? Do you need to take a break? Do you need to not open the emails? Do you need to do some yoga? Do you need to call a friend, or whatever it might be? So, resourcing from that self-compassion. Then labeling it as anxiety. Then noticing our thoughts, right? So how do we notice our thoughts? One thing you can do, sure, we can notice it through meditation and watching our thoughts come and go like the clouds. We've all heard that before if you've gone to a meditation class. But the other thing you can do is journal. So we can journal, and what is journaling but writing down our thoughts? So we can journal about the experience, and then we can look at it and see, here are the thoughts. Like beyond the physical description, everything else is thoughts, right? We could talk about a triggering event, maybe like an email. So that can be a fact. That's like neutral. It's an email. But then we add a story to it. The stressful email, the scary email, the critical email, right? And so when we can see our thoughts, that helps us be more an observer of it. And we know that the brain wants to be heard if it thinks that there's a threat, right? So basically, anxiety arises and creates a stress response, this fight, flight, or freeze, right? And that was the, we can fight, we can resist, or we can react, right? Or we can allow, which is our other option when we're out of that stress response. And just to remind you, mindfulness helps take us out of the stress response because we become aware, but then also self-compassion helps take us out of the stress response, because then we can resource from within that we actually are safe. The other thing, and then we write down our thoughts to become aware of the story we're telling. And then we can say, no fucking wonder I'm so anxious. Look at all these thoughts I'm having about this email or about this conversation or about this person. And we just become more aware of how our brain is like creating this whole scenario, right? Then there's a very physiological component to anxiety too, right? So when we become aware of our thoughts and what's going on, we can stop the spiraling of the thoughts, because if we don't, then we can often just talk ourselves into a panic attack, right? Like, oh no, am I going to have a panic attack? I'm freaking out right here. What if it happens right here in front of all these people? Oh my gosh, I have so much to do. I can't deal with this right now. So if we can stop the story and just allow the physical sensation of the emotion, it can keep it from spiraling. Like, I've had panic attacks. I know anxiety sucks, right? I remember having a panic attack, with when I had moved back in with my parents to save some money for 3 months. I was guiding at the time, and I just wanted to save some money between trips. And then I ended up having to pay for therapy. And my therapist was like, why are you coming to me? Or why? She was like, why are you living with your parents? And I was like, oh, to save some money between guiding trips. And she's like, but you're spending it on therapy. You should just like not live with your parents if that's a triggering event for you, because you can still love them and not have to be with them. So that's an example of when you can change a circumstance. And I did. But then you can also change your interpretation of the circumstance, right? But I get how physical anxiety can be sometimes. Like, I remember when I was having panic attacks, then I was afraid to drive, because I was like, what if it happens while I'm driving and I freak out and then people have to call the police because I'm like stopped in traffic or something. So then I would just not leave the house, right? But I want you to know that like I felt that level of anxiety and moved through it with these practices, right? So the thoughts. We become aware of the thoughts, we become aware of the story, and then we can move through that. The other, addressing the physiological component, is really important too. So we can, hi Monty, my neighbor's just walking by, so I'm waving. Yeah, hi. I have a cabin neighbor. They're the ones that are homesteading, and they have an infant, and they have like fucking cloth diapers hanging outside. They're growing their own vegetables. They have chickens, and they're in graduate school at Stanford, the both of them. I'm just like, wow, I'm really lucky I get to go home between and like wash clothes. So anyway, the physiological component is helping to calm down the breathing, because often what happens with anxiety is when we run with it, then our breath starts to become shallow and we don't even notice it, but we start to feel dizzy and we're like, why am I so dizzy? Oh my gosh, why am I so dizzy? And it's because we're not getting enough oxygen. So we can slow down our breath, right? Slow down our breath, slow and deep breaths. If you practice yoga, you may have had the experience where your instructor says, put your hand on your belly and feel your belly rise and fall. And that helps us tap into taking these deeper breaths, right? And so when we can slow down the physiology, that helps the brain calm down too, particularly with anxiety, right? So the other thing I like to remind myself of is that I look around and I become very present with what is. Like I look around and I go, oh, bluebells, chair, grass. You know, I even touch the earth. Touching the earth can be really helpful to ground you, because anxiety is often way up here. And if we can ground into our bodies, that can be so helpful. So sometimes I will just physically look around and notice that I'm safe. Because anxiety is pretty much never about what's actually happening. Even if someone sent you a fucked up, threatening, critical email, nothing's happening to you in the moment other than your internal process. And so I try to remind myself right now, Anna, you are totally safe. Everything is okay right now, right? You are able to be present. You are able to feel grounded in the body. I sometimes go and walk barefoot, or I do something very physical to bring me back into my body, like splash cold water on my face, because that like really brings me back into my body, that physical sensation of the cold water. Yeah. So changing the physiology can be really helpful as well, and grounding ourselves and coming back to the present moment, because anxiety is pretty much never about what's actually happening. Okay. So I want to just recap because and if you have any comments, feel free to type them in the chat box. I'm just looking here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any comments there, so that's good. No Q&A. But we don't want, like, our emotions aren't bad in and of themselves, right? We just don't want them, we just don't want to be hooked by them. We don't want to be taken over by them. Emotions are information. And I like to think that they're information about our thoughts, which is so cool because in this meditation retreat I'm doing, they're validating that we have this vital experience and then it's affected by our thoughts, right? That then it creates an emotional experience. So we can have an emotional experience. We can get curious, right? About why am I having this? But if we start getting curious about why I'm having this from the stress, fight, or flight response, we're going to create some fucked up stories. Once we are out of the stress response and once we are more calm and centered, then we can have more of an accurate experience of what might have been the trigger and what would be a more wise and compassionate way to handle it, right? Because when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, we become like an emotional brain is not our wise brain, right? So it's not that emotions are bad. It's when we're caught in the story of the emotion that we can't come from a wise place in our hearts, right? So when we can come out of the stress response, we can drop into that wise place in our hearts and then have a more skillful response. So we become aware that we have an experience of an emotion like anxiety. We label it. Oh, there's anxiety. There's anxiety. We become aware of self-compassion so that we can come out of the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? Remembering that we could be resisting the emotion and fighting it. We could be reacting to it and wanting to do stuff and to make it go away, right? Oh, you know what I didn't speak about is avoiding the emotion. So the third way we can respond is that is counterproductive is avoiding the emotion. So that would be what a lot of you rebels like to do, which is buffering, right? We're like, this doesn't really exist. I'm going to drink some wine and look, I don't feel it anymore. Or like, oh, I'm going to go shopping and just spend money and get that little dopamine hit from that. Or I'm going to go do an adrenaline junkie thing to distract myself. Or I'm going to overeat and get that temporary dopamine hit. So we have these different experiences of the buffering that help us avoid feeling the emotion. So just be aware of that third sort of counterproductive way, right? And we can just notice what we're doing or what we have an inclination to do. And then we can say, but there's this other choice, which is to allow it. So we can label it, anxiety, the self-compassion. I really want to resist this right now. I really want to react. I really want to avoid this right now, right? And that's okay. That's a human response. And I'm going to choose to allow it, right? I'm going to just feel the vibrations in my body, feel the physical sensations. I'm going to become aware of my thoughts through meditation, through journaling, however that might be. And then I'm going to calm down my nervous system with the breathing, right? Becoming present, grounding, maybe a physiological change like splashing water on the face, washing my hands, going for a walk around the block and really feeling my feet touch the ground, getting barefoot and touching the ground with your feet. And then from that place, we can inquire, why did I feel this anxiety? Because emotions give us information about our thoughts. And when we're not hooked, when we're actually just purely allowing it and experience it, then we can say, wow, maybe I'm in a really toxic work environment that I really need to address. Or maybe I'm in an unsafe relationship that I really need to have a difficult conversation about, right? Or maybe I'm totally ignoring my calling. And that's why I wake up with anxiety every morning. Because what I really want to be doing is this. And I'm not. right? Then we can learn what our emotion is trying to teach us from a more wise place and take skillful action instead of fighting, reacting, or avoiding, right? And sometimes anxiety is like because you drank 3 cups of coffee. I have a lot of patience with anxiety, and I'm like, well, stop drinking coffee because that shit's going to make your heart rate and then a heart race, and then our brain interprets it all crazy. So I try to also, lifestyle wise, do the things that help calm my anxiety and prevent it, right? I take my supplements, I take magnesium, I do yoga, I exercise, I try to get good sleep. I stop drinking coffee, even though I fucking love it because it makes me anxious, right? We are in a human body. We can't ignore that, right? We are part of a being in this human body experience. And that's just the reality of it. So we have to honor that too. So think about all the ways in your life that you could bring your energy down from out here and up here to more grounded, right? Whether that's also a rhythm, in Ayurveda, anxieties really manifest as like vata energy that's like wind and blowing around, and we can really calm it down by grounding, right? So how are we eating? How are we sleeping? Do we have a routine, which is very grounding? Not like you have to have a rigid plan for every day, but do I have a daily morning routine and an evening routine between which the spontaneity of life happens? That's much more grounding than letting life just push you every which way, right? To have a commitment to that kind of grounded practice in the morning and in the evening, even if it's just a short meditation or some sun salutations, right? So listen to the podcast because I go into this in a lot more detail there. And I really hope that you experiment with these different ways to impact your anxiety, because life is too short to be fucking stressed and suffering about something that's not even happening, except for the story that we're adding to the emotional experience, to the energetic, vibrational, physical experience. So like I said earlier, my teacher said today, the vital energy, emotions are vital energy with a story. So life's too short to be creating fucked up stories that don't serve us, right? So we can use these practices to see anxiety for what it is and skillfully inquire, what is it trying to teach us and what can we change in our life if we want to, or we can change the story, right? Okay, my friends. So that's it. So happy Wake the Fuck Up Wednesday. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. It was lovely sharing the yurt with y'all. And I will listen to the pod. And if you want to join Freedom School and dive into this more deeply, go to joinfreedomschool.com. We would love to have you. There is forever access now. So now's the time to join. Bye. Now we're going to turn off all the 20 ways. Bye.